everyone to part 3 of our webinar series, Examining the New Normal in Construction. I'm Nicholas Johnson, Chief Evangelist for Kahua, and I'll be your host today. And I'm very pleased to be able to introduce to you to our guest presenter today. Walter Tersch is sitting here beside me. We're in the same room together in the GSA building. Walter is the Sustainability Program Manager for the Office of Architecture and Engineering at the GSA Public Buildings Service. The work that Walter is overseeing sets the bar for sustainability efforts in our industry and will help create a cleaner and more sustainable world. And folks, those are not just flattering words. In this presentation, you will see that the GSA is truly setting the standard for how we plan for sustainability and monitor our progress achieving these goals. Our hope is that your organization is inspired to act in a similar way. Walter, welcome to our webinar, and thanks for being with us today. Also, as a thank you and as a sign of Kahua's commitment to making the world a better place, we will plant a tree in honor of each person who attends this webinar today. So just by logging in today, each of you has made a difference. So Walter, let's move on with it. Can you tell us, Walter, just briefly, I understand the GSA is two worlds, two halves. Two missions. Can you talk about that for just a moment and help us understand what those two missions are?
So first of all, thanks for having me, Nicholas.
We're glad you're here. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks to you all for joining today. So General Services Administration was started in 1949 with the mission to enable other federal agencies across the civilian government to focus on their missions. So I'm in the Public Building Service. We are the federal government's landlord. We are the largest landowner in the United States. And we do make sure that agencies have the space that they need to focus on their missions. The other half is the Federal Acquisition Service, the supplies. We like to poke a little fun and say, you know, they supply the pencils, we supply the buildings that are going to be standing 250 years from now. But in all respect, though, you know, they do all this exciting work, procuring, you know, electric vehicles and you know, all the different office furniture, everything else that people need. So that's sort of GSA in a nutshell. We work behind the scenes. We manage federal office buildings, but also federal U.S. courthouses, as well as land ports of entry. If you've ever driven across the border to Niagara Falls or Tijuana, San Diego, whatever, you've passed through a border station the GSA has built and maintained for customs and border protection.
Oh, interesting. All right. So a few fun facts about the GSA. The largest civilian landlord in the U.S. government with over 1 million federal employees housed in GSA spaces. Over 50, over 8,000, over 8,100 leased properties, nearly 400 million rentable square feet, and a third of those 1,500 buildings we talked about are designated as historic. So you can't be a bigger landlord than the GSA at least in North America. That would be the truth. So tell us a little bit about, you know, kind of the principles that are guiding the work you do here, Walter. I spoke with a staff member, by the way, this week, a GSA staff member who helps administer your project management information system, which happens to be Kahua. And I was told that there are now 29,000 projects housed in Kahua on your Kahua site. So you guys obviously know projects. You know projects as well as anybody possibly could. You've done more than any agency I know of. Tell us about the standards that the GSA's put in place for your facilities and for the projects that drive those things.
So our projects really run the gamut. A project could be replacing a security camera or replacing the carpet. It could be multi-$100 million new construction building. So we've got both of those in the pipeline, and you know, all our projects above, I believe, $50,000, we require to be in Kahua. I think there's probably smaller ones too, but that's kind of how we track things because, you know, we're kind of a distributed organization. You know, we're right now sitting in the central office, but there's a lot of field offices, service centers, and regional offices that, you know, deserve to have some autonomy to just take care of, hey, if the tenant says we've got a leaky faucet, they shouldn't have to submit some form to us to replace the faucet.
Right. Obviously, by the scale of the number of buildings you own versus the number of buildings that you rent, most of your projects then are fit-out projects.
I think that's accurate, especially with the new normal of the increase of the telework. We've been really accelerating the trends that began about 6 years ago to migrate from costly leased space into federal office space, especially now that, there's a lot of people who just have found they and their teams can get the same amount of work done or more if they're cutting out the 60 to 90 minutes that might be spent for commuting each day. So there's certainly been a lot more work to renovate the spaces we have, adapt to modern open office spaces, et cetera, as opposed to just new construction. But the unifying guidance for everything is our P100 facilities standards. Okay. So my background is in environmental law, and I don't know that much, about a little out of practice, but I do know about the supremacy clause of the Constitution, which says states cannot mandate the federal government to do things. So by extension, state and local property building codes do not apply to GSA. That doesn't mean we run roughshod. We try and play nice. In practice, we use these facility standards. Our P100 is our building code. So it's about 300 pages. It really runs the gamut. We've got fire and life safety, structural and civil engineering, mechanical engineering, electrical, whole section on sustainability, and then, urban development, good neighbor stuff, all those types of things. And in practice, where there is a conflict between the local codes and P100, we tend to choose whatever's more stringent, within reason. If there's some jurisdiction that has something totally nuts, hey, we cross those bridges when we come there. But we've got some pretty progressive mandates that I'll be talking about in terms of electrification, material sustainability, LEED certification, that in many cases go beyond locally required.
So when it comes to a local code, you are not obligated to follow that local code, but often you will if it's a more stringent code and it makes sense.
Yeah.
You give those local offices autonomy to make those decisions.
Well, yeah. I mean, if there's a waiver from P100, if they're deviating from P100, we've got a detailed paperwork process. Okay. So we can document. They say, oh, it would cost twice, 2 or 3 times what we budgeted to meet this, or this building's got a weird layout. We cannot get in to use a certain type of plumbing. We got to use PVC instead of whatever. So we've got some processes, but that's right. Okay.
P100 is the standard. When was it created? How does it get updated?
Yeah, great question. So P100, if memory serves correct, dates back to at least the 1980s. We update it generally every 3 years. 2024 P100 is in our issuance process right now. Over the course of last year, we collected 750 comments from a variety of stakeholders in the commercial building industry, different companies that are selling supplies and think our standards should call for them. Internal people who are used to implementing GSA standards and say, oh, this thing's confusing. There's conflicting parts here. Can you streamline this wording at a table, easing it, this and that. So the 2024 P100 is slated to come out this summer, and we're really excited. I don't think it's a dramatic sea change, but what we did change in 2022 was we had our 2021 version, and we did a little addendum because there was certain executive orders that came out after the previous version of P100 had already, gone to press, if you will. And we issued a little addendum to clarify and memorialize certain things. So what we changed there was calling for all electric space and water heating operation by default. So asking for a waiver if people are buying new fossil fueled equipment. So that's one of the most radical things in there because it's a big change.
Right.
Fossil fuels, they're good at providing heat. Right. Heat pumps, however, have come a long way. And then one fun fact is the most efficient furnaces are usually around 95% efficiency. Heat pumps will be 2 to 4 times higher than that because they can actually multiply the energy that goes into them by pulling thermal energy from the atmosphere surrounding the building. So we're really excited. One of the largest buildings here in DC, 3 million square feet, Ronald Reagan Building and International Trade Center, built about 25 years ago, Federal Triangle, beautiful building. A lot of its mechanical systems are reaching end of life. So we're doing all air source heat pumps. Huge accomplishment.
It's a fossil fuel system now.
But when the project's done 3-4 years from now, all air source heat pumps. So they penciled it out. And thanks to efficiency upgrades as well, new windows, insulation, these types of things. They're able to save enough energy that they're actually not going to need to upgrade any of the electrical mains going to the building. So it's kind of fascinating that, through efficiency, you might not necessarily have to spend more money on the infrastructure. So very exciting. We've also got some new material sustainability stuff that's been my stock and trade lately. Concrete and asphalt sustainability standards we laid out that I'll be touching on at the end of the presentation, calling for whole building life cycle assessment, looking at the materials that go into buildings.
Mm-hmm.
Can you lighten that environmental footprint by 20% over a whole all material 60-year lifespan? Bike lane requirements, refrigerants, and then EV chargers. We didn't change it, but we did. I looked at it and I'm like, I'm a lawyer. I'm usually good at reading confusing page-long sentences. This is unclear as can be. So we made some suggestions to try and clarify what percentage of occupants need to have their own EV charger for personally owned and federally owned vehicles. And we've been doing some work to get those implemented. So that's B100.
All right, let's get to today's topic then. Let's get right to the meat of it. Can we start, Walter, by just simply defining our terms? How does the GSA define sustainability?
Yeah, so we cheated a little bit here because we paraphrased, or we basically leveraged what the United Nations had come up with in 1987. So the condition under which humans and nature can exist in productive harmony, ensuring that future generations are not disadvantaged by the current generation. So it's kind of like, whatever Native American tribe had this seventh generation philosophy, or different. You can phrase it different ways. We're not lending the future to our descendants. We're borrowing from them. I don't know. Just the idea is essentially stewardship, efficiency, trying to stretch our dollars further, save resources while we're at it.
Well, then how do we go about ensuring that future generations are not disadvantaged by this current generation?
Yeah, so great segue, Nicholas, to the guiding principles for sustainable federal buildings. So this is something that originated in the early 2000s through rigorous public-private dialogue. I think the first version came out around 2006, and it's been required for federal projects through sustainability executive orders since 2009 or so. So these touch on various pieces. So integrated design, energy, water, indoor environmental quality, materials, and then the latest cell of that honeycomb, if you will, that was added in about three or 4 years ago is resilience. So improved ability of buildings to withstand extreme weather events. So, high winds, storms, wildfire, these types of things where there's some fascinating data that shows that dollar for dollar, the money you spend to protect against a lot of risks in terms of these physical exposures can really pay off in terms of avoiding tremendous costs later on from damage if you were not being as prudent up front.
Yeah.
So this sustainable federal building, the guiding principles we call them, are tracked through a checklist I created, which essentially just sort of translates them into a more actionable, frankly, 3-page PDF, which is linked from these slides that you will also receive as a PDF. So it's real
Walter,
nice.
While we're on that, so again, what he just said, that anyone that would like to see these slides afterwards, we will make those available for you. It'll be a PDF you can download. I wanted to ask, though, I noticed on a previous slide there was something highlighted in red, and it noted that it was a Kahua would help with that. Is that what is indicated when you've highlighted something in red in this material?
Yeah,
Okay.
I should have mentioned that. So yeah, where you see these little red rectangles around, those are data points and goals that the Kahua sustainability app that we'll be talking a little bit about helps GSA track. So I outlined the requirements for this. The Kahua team built it out. So we do have fields where we can, track all these little bespoke government-specific requirements.
So these 6 guiding principles, then, I understand, have led to really to 3 different areas of focus. And did I slide past that? Okay,
I changed the order. it's coming up. But yeah, we could go ahead to the three. We'll get there organically.
Okay. So tell us about how the executive order 14057, how did that affect what you're doing here?
Yeah, so every president signs a sustainability executive order. The one that's currently in effect right now requires us to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 65% compared to 2008 baseline. In the previous slide, I actually talked about news item as of yesterday. 17 years later, the Department of Energy issued a rule implementing a provision of the Energy Independence and Security Act, which essentially requires a more dramatic reduction in fossil fuel emissions from federal building operations. So it's trying to kind of use the federal government as a trailblazer for other buildings, showing that, hey, you can still maintain the thermal comfort and everything you want with lower emissions and lower reliance on fossil fuel.
Well, let me pursue that a little bit. First of all, you said every president signs an executive order about sustainability. Is that since 2008, since this baseline was created, or?
So yeah, that's a great question. I feel like there might have been one going back to like 1992 or so. I know
president that
H.W. Bush had one.
Okay.
George W. Bush had one. So yeah.
So it's a common thing. Have we had a president that backed down on sustainability initiatives?
I'm going to be diplomatic and say they may have taken away specific goals. Okay. So there could be more general, just saying, as opposed to divert 50% of waste, or go up to 75%, say divert waste. So okay. So there's been some that's definitely one thing I've seen. But one thing that we try to be aware of is the business case for sustainability. You're throwing less stuff in the landfill, you're paying less tipping fees, you're able to get some money. Here in this building, the money that they collect from recycling cans and bottles that people put in the recycle bin helps support the child care center. So there can be a lot of benefits in many cases to sustainability. So we're trying to be aware of that as well.
When I said up front that the work you folks are doing here is truly changing the way the world will build and the results, the community that we'll live in. And those are not just complimentary words. Because the government is willing to invest in this kind of innovation. Sometimes when private sector can't, when profit or when margins are ruling the day, you're going to tend to do the things that you know how to do, that you can do efficiently. And your office has been willing to do some new things, not even knowing exactly what the implications might be, but they're just the right thing to do. And it's a good thing. It's been a good thing for us to invest in. And we see over and over again when someone like the GSA is willing to set a new standard and prove out a concept that, my goodness, we can actually replace fossil fuel with heat pumps now and save energy rather than spend more, and not even have to. I'm very impressed that the project you mentioned, you didn't have to upgrade the electrical capacity of that building and still went from a fossil fuel source to an all electric source. That's impressive. And again, those are things that a competitive market is not going to embrace as quickly as the work you're doing. So I really think what you're doing is important. And that's why we thought this was a critical topic to talk about today.
We try and take our cues from the private sector. In some cases, there's some fantastic designers out there. We try and hire those fantastic designers when we can. But yeah, the federal government has a little bit longer time span to work with. We don't need something to pay back in 2 or 3 years, like somebody operating a strip mall, a gas station might. Right. We're in a building that's almost 110 years old. So we look at things on, 25-year payback. And in some cases, we do also have the ability to help make things standard practice, like LEED. U.S. Green Building Council's LEED certification system is something that GSA helped to establish, and it was around 2002. That we first started requiring it on designs then and later. And now it's really a standard practice. And there's some fantastic data on things, better performance, better operating costs, better tenant satisfaction in buildings that are LEED certified or buildings that meet the guiding principles, which frankly overlap a lot. And the sustainable design checklist does try to get a lot of mileage out of LEED certification, because that's something that's used throughout the industry now. The private sector knows about it. So we try and get as much mileage as we can out of the LEED certification. and demonstrate, okay, that also hits these federal specific ones. So try to be efficient when we can.
Well, this is all tremendous and inspirational, but we can't claim any success with any of this if we're not measuring and monitoring the progress we're making in some way. So can you share with our audience how the GSA worked with the extended Kahua team to innovate in this area?
Yeah, so there is a whole slew of metrics. There are publicly available agency sustainability plans that do show each executive branch agency's progress towards goals from, for example, the Sustainability Executive Order. Our plan is in our report is available. We tend to be one of the better agencies in terms of performing on this because, frankly, we get to focus on the mission. One thing I like about working at GSA, we don't necessarily have to think about the outside the box. We're thinking about the box, just the building. Mm-hmm. We can be real focused on what are the best practices in terms of office space. We know what our portfolio is. We know where we can get the most bang for the buck, where we've got the poorest performing buildings, et cetera. So we do a lot of careful tracking of our utility costs, monthly, portfolio-wise, trends, et cetera. So energy efficiency is always a popular one. And, our first energy plan goes back to the energy crisis in 1973, 50 years ago, and that's been a huge focus for a long time because you change out the lighting the next month, you see the change on your energy bill. It's real quick feedback. Fuel switching is something that we've been getting more aggressive on lately with the push towards electrification. Also, you see a lot of goals in here about carbon-free electricity procurement. So this is something that came from President Biden's executive order about trying to buy electricity from renewable or carbon-free, which includes nuclear. Right. That's zero carbon. I support it. That's an option too, especially in the near term when you're just really trying to make a difference. So, you're not going to see the same benefit from all electrification if you're buying dirty electricity as opposed to clean. So we've got a whole slew of metrics. So, greenhouse gas reductions on total basis, percentage, how many all electric buildings we have already. It's like 15% of our portfolio. And, in your old stomping grounds, the South, it's over 50 electric in the South easily. I was in Florida last week. Hey, they don't have natural gas piping. They don't need it.
Well, in Georgia, which I call home, we've just brought on the first nuclear reactor in the U.S. in 40 years?
40 years, yeah. That's certainly an option. So yeah, we look at percentage of buildings that meet the guiding principles. We use Kahua to track that. Energy, water intensity. Kahua is our system of record for tracking construction, demolition, waste diversion. That's one of the first metrics to really reach maturity since we've transitioned to Kahua over the past 3 years or so. And then, we've got EV charging stations, buildings that are designed to be net zero ready. So essentially, they know how much PV they would need to add to the roof. You can just add it later. You could get financing to add solar panels in many cases. So we've got a whole slew of goals. And this slide is kind of giving similar information, kind of just different format. We've got these sort of three sides here: efficiency, infrastructure, sourcing. Sourcing, you can see buying lower carbon materials, sourcing clean or carbon-free electricity. And this is just kind of a nifty graphic. You can click on Vision in the slide deck to see this. Just all these different ways we come at things in terms of, heat pumps, buildings that can shed demand. Grid interactive efficient buildings can shed demand when it's, peak demand days, super hot, everybody's running the air conditioning, the grid is getting strained. We can curtail things a little bit dynamically in an automatic way in some places.
Only because it's a particular curiosity of mine. Tell me about embedded carbon, and I think we're going to come to that in a minute, and we can wait if it's appropriate. But I wanted to ask what you're doing about embedded carbon, specifically in concrete. Yeah. Because I'm fascinated that I'm told that our world 40% of the carbon in our environment is from embedded carbon in concrete, because we build everything out of concrete. It's a great tool to build out of, but it seems to be coloring our clouds.
So embodied carbon is a huge area. So the built environment comprises 40% of all, worldwide greenhouse gas emissions. Concrete and steel are the biggest pieces of that. You might have heard the statistic that, global concrete production alone, if it were a country, it would produce more emissions than any country except for China or the United States.
Wow.
Huge. There's some astronomical number of tons that is produced per human per year. So it's huge. I mean, it's the most used. The only substance that humans use more of than concrete is water. So it's the literal foundation of society. But it's also fantastic. Ancient Roman concrete is still in place. So concrete has certainly been a focus of a lot of bike clean initiatives because there's a lot of room to reduce its footprint through different types of cements. It's been a really exciting time to be involved in material sustainability, and concrete and steel are the two areas where there's the biggest opportunity for reduction. So yeah, we'll touch on that a little bit more as well.
Excellent. Okay, the GSA's Green Proving Ground.
Yeah, just a little plug for one of the more exciting aspects of what we do. So GSA uses our portfolio of 1,800 owned buildings as a real-world test bed, wherein companies that have not yet fully commercialized new innovative technologies will see value in testing them in real-world environments. And what we do is they donate the technologies and products to us for free, and then we hire at relatively modest cost the Department of Energy's national labs to do very robust measurement and verification on, quad pane windows. Hey, according to this, it worked out pretty well. So we've got several dozen technologies that have been evaluated. Some of them we found out, it's not really fully baked. Other things like, maglev chillers, condensing furnaces, this is standard practice now. We validated them like 10 years ago. And through this validation, we're able to help, to your point, help make things more mainstream and get them, wider adoption, which is a win for innovation, a win for building owners who want to save money and also not feel like they're taking a risk on something that's unproven. And, we're really excited. This 2024 crop will be announced in the next 2 months. And it's a bumper crop.
So vendors can provide their systems, their tools, their materials, and GSA's Green Proving Ground will evaluate those and effectively rate them.
Yeah, it's a competitive selection process. There's pre-screening. We did a robust conversation last week where we were getting little 3 minutes speed date presentations from the companies selling these things. And, it was really like a murder board. We're asking them all these tough questions, trying to find flaws, and then we'll score all these things. So we don't choose all of them, but we do choose things that look like they could be useful in our portfolio, be useful outside of our portfolio, and make a difference.
All right. So we've talked about some of the things that we want to measure, the places where improvement is measurable. Talk to me a little bit about data management and how Kahua worked with the GSA to help you kind of monitor some of the goals that you have.
Yeah. So having goals is one thing, but you're not going to get there unless you are able to track it. There's some great quote about accountability. What gets measured gets done. All these things.
Yes.
So we needed to have a efficient and systematic way to collect and report project sustainability details. So there's really 3 main things that we have in this custom sustainability app within Kahua. And to be clear, we've got at least a dozen custom apps within Kahua for GSA because we've got a large pipeline of projects. We've got specific data needs that other landlords might not have. But the sustainability app has essentially 3 main areas. So scopes, what is the project including? So we can easily report on all our roof replacement projects. What are the environmental performance goals? What type of energy, water savings, greenhouse gas reductions are they anticipating? And then we have a compliance tab. So those guiding principles we were talking about are systematically tracked in Kahua. So who populates it? That's our architects and engineers, as well as our project managers. So our scope of work template as well as the language of our P100 facilities standards, requires our designers to populate the Kahua Sustainability app at several points during project delivery, from preliminary concept design through construction drawings. So this is much better than emailing hundreds of project managers every time a question comes in. And, this systematic approach really was birthed the last time we had a big portfolio of projects. The Recovery Act of 2009 gave GSA about $5 billion, and we had 500 projects. So we wanted to be systematic. So that framework is kind of what has lately evolved into the Kahua Sustainability app.
Okay, can you just show us a little bit about, maybe talk us through how it actually works and what data is collected?
Yeah. So this is a image of the sustainability app, and on the right side you can see there's sections. So different for example, under goals we've got waste management, LEED certification, Energy Star certification. Has it been approved by management? Under narratives, there's areas for human interest stories and close out any types of lessons learned, etc. Next. And I'll start here with a view of the actual sustainability app's scope page. So you can see here, this is our new construction courthouse in Huntsville, Alabama. So whenever you're doing a new building, you're going to have a lot of things like a facade. You're going to have walls, roof, windows, some type of HVAC system, daylighting, lighting systems. So all these different things, along with areas to track, on-site renewables, stormwater management. We've got a list of over 50 different scope items that this enables us to systematically track. The scope items also enable us to report externally into things like Department of Energy's compliance tracking system. So, we ask for reporting, we need to use it for our own reporting. Right. So there's everything kind of goes up to the top eventually. But this is a little bit more systematic in that, we don't have one person like misspelling something. And if you're just using like a narrative, it gets sloppy. It's hard to tell what people mean. This is designed to allow reporting. Thank you. And then the goals tab is pretty easy to wrap your head around, and probably some of the more frequent data calls that I get relate to data that is tracked on the goals tab. So you can see here, the project team was targeting a 15 or 14% reduction in their energy intensity and total energy compared to a modeled ASHRAE baseline, ASHRAE 90.1. So in this case, they were including plug loads. There's little boxes for comments for all that. We can see the anticipated GHG reduction. That was a new feature we added into Kahua when we were working on this. The system will literally take the mix of different utilities, how much natural gas, how much electricity, steam, chilled water, all these different things like that, and then use the emissions intensities of these different energy sources to create an estimated nationally average GHG reduction.
So the goal here, based on that ASHRAE standard, was 14% reduction, and it looks like in this case you've achieved a 42% reduction. I'm reading that right.
So for GHG reduction, exactly. So there's different ways of looking at the same coin. Energy, GHGs, depending on what kind of energy you're using. GHGs could be zero if you're using carbon-free electricity. So that's sort of where we're trying to go. And and then the compliance tab is also an important one because we distill down the guiding principles, which are 20 pages for projects really, into a simple 9-item checklist that is actionable. The first one covers a lot of ground because it's essentially asking, are you getting LEED Silver or better? We did a nice crosswalk between what LEED certification requires and what the guiding principles requires. And because LEED can cover so much ground, we're able to simplify and not ask people to submit that same stuff to U.S. Green Building Council and GSA. That costs money. We try to be streamlined and efficient where we can, because the more you ask for, the more somebody's going to pad their bid. We've got contractors on here. They have to deal with uncertainties and overhead. So we try and be mindful of that. So the criteria are in similar categories to the guiding principles. So you've got things about energy, things about water, material resilience. And then for each one of those, somebody can click the little flyout in Kahua to open it and say, yes, I am getting Energy Star products. Yes, my cooling tower is not using single pass cooling. Yes, I am managing that 95th percentile rain event on site as required by law.
Excellent.
Yeah. And yeah, the material, and here's a different view of that 4-page checklist I was talking about, which is available at gsa.gov/sustainable design. And, it does sort of say the language that each one requires, which also lives in Kahua, as well as the reference of where that's coming from, related lead credits, and also some related guidance to try and ease compliance.
Well, if I can imitate a proud parent for a moment, we feel like this is a great example of how Kahua lives our mission, which is to enable the industry to innovate. Kahua did not know what was needed for a sustainability application. That wasn't our area of expertise, but the largest landlord in North America did know. So your subject matter expertise and our low-code platform came together to create something that could be useful for your team and really for the entire world. So I think it's a great example. As I said, if I can just put on my proud parent hat as a Kahua team member, we're really pleased that we were able to help you guys develop this and that it's working so well for you. Let's talk about what's next, Walter.
Exactly.
So what are the driving forces and what are the things that you see coming down the road based on our current political environment, our current focus on trying to save our planet? What do you see next here at the GSA specifically?
Yeah, so a big push these past few years has been implementing the appropriations the GSA received from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law of 2021, as well as the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. Each of these, frankly, generational appropriations, we don't take this for granted. It's not every day that we get a big infusion of money like this, but we certainly have no shortage of deferred maintenance as a result of funding constraints that could put these funds to good use. So the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or BIL, is something that we put to use along the border stations. So all that $3.4 billion went to the land ports of entry that we have along the Canadian and Mexican borders. And that was really a catalyst to developing sustainability policies that could do something lower impact in terms of paving. GSA usually does vertical construction buildings. Most of the paving we do is at these border stations. So I got asked, Thanksgiving 2021, hey, Walter, figure out how we can come up with some sustainability standards for concrete and asphalt, and thus begun the journey of my career. So it's been very exciting to take a crash course in material sustainability. And that came in handy when the Inflation Reduction Act was passed, and it created a lot of catalysts, like it provided money to implement a lot of the goals from that executive order of 2021. So Department of Energy has done a lot of, hydrogen grants, industrial research support, and GSA got this almost $3.4 billion. So almost $1 billion of that's for emerging and sustainable technologies. The other 2.15 is for low embodied carbon materials. So this is really exciting because, like I said, for half a century, we've been looking at energy efficiency, but buildings materials comprise about 30%, that's about 30 times bigger impact in terms of greenhouse gases to build the building than all the emissions to run the building for a given year. So in other words, it takes 30 to 50 years for running the building to make more of a difference than how you built it in the first place.
Right. Another reason why our buildings need to last longer, just very simply. Hey, this is a good time. I'll remind the audience, this is our last segment of our agenda as we wrap this conversation up. So good time for you to put questions in our chat section. We'll get to those as soon as we finish this section. We're here on a slide about embedded carbon, something I asked about earlier, and something you were excited to study asphalt and concrete for those stations. Tell us what the work there looks like.
Yeah, so I wouldn't have never expected to become a material sustainability SME, but that's what they say I am now. So yeah, I'm collating GSA's.
That's not what you learned in law school.
Yeah, it was not really as big of a focus back then. But yeah, so the upfront embodied carbon is what we're talking about here. So we're talking emissions associated with digging materials up from the earth, transporting them to the factory and making them. So cradle to factory gate. And then operational carbon is what we usually think about, basically energy consumption. So we're talking about global warming potential. We talk about carbon dioxide equivalent.
P100 is looking at those things, addressing those.
So P100 has some concrete and asphalt sustainability standards in there. And then we go a little bit further for the IRA investments because our legislative appropriations, our marching orders from Congress, were to be substantially lower carbon. So, for BIL and P100, that was just because, our chief of staff for the Public Building Service said, hey, what can we do to do it? But now that actually was helpful because it set us up to be a leader in this cross-government Buy Clean initiative that gave GSA and the Federal Highway Administration at least $2 billion apiece to do low carbon materials. So we're talking not only concrete and asphalt, but also steel and glass. And then this slide here just drives home, why is it important? You can see here, even after 30 years of operating a building, the embodied carbon impact is still larger than operational, and that the materials only become more important as we get better sealed buildings that are more energy efficient. Materials are really a big opportunity. So yeah, we're trying to ask industry, hey, what do you got in terms of steel that's lower carbon, made with electric arc furnaces or recycled content, concrete that has less cement, different admixtures, et cetera.
I hear a lot about the green steel now at the various shows that I go to. Fascinating that I think we can improve from what we remember as a steel mill to what we're creating now. That's so much better for our planet.
The U.S. is a leader in terms of low carbon steel because we have a lot of scrap to deal with. So you obviously have tailwinds if you're able just to recycle the steel as opposed to having to dig up the iron ore and smelt it. But yeah, we set GWP limits based on a combination of industry averages and actual product specific documentation from environmental product declarations. We're in a pilot, and what I'm going to be doing after this call is working on a fact sheet about what has changed in the past year. What types of impacts have we been seeing in terms of more transparency, lower carbon options? The glass industry has really been stepping up. And then this last slide I have here just shows how it can be a challenge in certain parts of the country. We have more IRA projects in Texas than any other state. We've got 22. Every single one of them needs low carbon concrete. However, the entire area of West Texas is a no man's land in terms of the documentation, the EPDs that we need. So we've been really putting on our salesperson hats, really trying to talk to a lot of these small businesses and tell them, hey, here's how you get an EPD. Here's why we think it's in your best interest and it'll be a worthwhile business decision. So it's been really exciting to be the tip of the spear for the federal government's Buy Clean program, and to really try and see some companies saying things like, okay, if we get the contract, we'll develop an EPD. Can you give us more time? Okay, yeah, sure. Well, we'll roll with you. We understand. We understand you don't want to spend $5,000 without knowing you're going to actually have the job. And then I'm not going to read too much on this slide, but I just wanted to point out that in addition to these material-specific approaches, we have an approach that looks at the whole building. So for our new construction major modernization projects, we make sure that our designers are also looking at durability. Will the material be lasting as long as it can, so that we're not doing something that looks 2% lower carbon up front, but it lasts half as long? Hey, that's penny wise, pound foolish. We want to try and avoid that. We want to make sure they're using the right amount of materials, considering, hey, could you use mass timber instead of steel? These are exciting things that we want to see some creativity from our designers for, and that's why we have this whole building life cycle assessment measure.
Well, Walter, we promised our audience that we'd get to some Q&A, so how about we do that now? All right, I've got a question from Mr. Garvey, or from T. Garvey. I don't know if that's Mr. or Miss. Does OAE expose these analytics through the GSA's D2D portal or elsewhere?
We use D2D for a few things. I don't know how much of our Kahua data is getting into Kahua into D2D right now. But we're situated for that. We do have some dashboarding capabilities that are set up, particularly regarding schedule and budget, that are more mature. And as we get more data gathered sustainability wise, we'll certainly include D2D, which is a name for like Tableau dashboards, is a potential way to ease the reporting.
All right, from Matt Stone at Commercial Contracting. For concrete embedded carbon, it seems a couple of options have been rushed into practice. Is there any data available for the long-term product durability versus traditional concrete durability?
Right. So to be clear, things like fly ash and slag have been part of concrete for 100 years. My peers who have been involved in architecturally designing projects have achieved 40% reductions in embodied carbon for concrete at buildings they built 15 years ago. They used it for structural applications like foundations. So we certainly are continuing to talk to our partners at the National Ready Mix Association, National Asphalt Paving Association, et cetera. And there is a fantastic federal highways tech brief that I'd be happy to share with you, Matt, if you're interested, that looks at, for example, Portland limestone cement. And the gist is, there's different things about cure time, water content people have to be aware of. But I did carefully review that and didn't find, red flags or things that were giving us a massive pause, nor through our 3 RFIs did we have people saying, oh, hit the brakes. If anything, one of our private sector peers in the commercial real estate industry was saying, my problem with GSA's concrete standards is they're too modest. Every project I've done in the past 10 years would comply with all your limits. So, we do certainly care about durability, but the data we've seen so far suggests that we're not doing anything too out there. And we're certainly also going to be leveraging and potentially harmonizing with work being done by federal highways and EPA.
Okay, we've got one from one of your federal peers. Joel Vaughn from NOAA asks, is it feasible to use the GSA Kahua CMIS with associated GSA apps by other federal agencies for non-GSA projects? Smaller agencies would benefit from the GSA investment in time and effort. It would serve to standardize PMCM practice, enabling smoother collaboration on the projects that the GSA does manage for those agencies with mixed own, leased, rent, real property inventory. So it sounds like they want to borrow your Kahua system, and that might be a better question for one of our Kahua business side folks. So,
yeah, I think that's above my pay grade, or at least outside of my job responsibility.
That's to the right or left of my pay grade. So we'll, Joel, we'll ask our team, our business team, to follow up. That would be a kind of a contract question. We have a contract with the GSA that allows for certain use, and we'll have our team follow up with you. Okay, back to T. Garvey. Has GSA had any challenges integrating with certain data sources within the agency? Has that been more because of the technology security requirements or something else, if you have had any challenges? And you might not be the best person to answer that, Walt, but I know that we've done more than a dozen integrations with different softwares. I know we've replaced a lot of point solutions, and we've replaced a lot of homegrown solutions here. So I think at one point we counted over 70 different silos of data are now in the Kahua environment. But integrations, I know, was a very strong point. We did more than a dozen. Do you have any other information about that, or is that one we should follow up with a better answer as well?
Yeah, we could. The short answer is, yeah, there's always some challenges, but I also agree with you, Nicholas, that Kahua has integrated well with things like Rexus, which is GSA's database of how many buildings do we own, where are they, what's the gross square footage, when were they built, all this stuff, all that is pulled into Kahua so that Kahua can focus more on projects as opposed to what is our portfolio already comprised of. Same thing, we've got other systems of sources of truth for, utility bills. So there's certainly rooms full of people who are in charge of annual reporting, to Department of Energy, et cetera, trying to gather things. It's never, Jetsons, you just push this button and a robot prints it out for you. So it's kind of a mixed bag. So, there's always work to do, but, we've used SQL servers. There's people who know Google scripts. We use a lot of Google apps. We've got a lot of APIs. security requirements wise, yeah, sometimes something is not FedRAMPed. There's something called FedRAMP.
Right.
I believe Kahua has it. Well, I sure hope it does since we've been using it for these years.
Yes, Kahua is FedRAMP compliant, IL level 2, moving to level 4 later this year, actually.
So yeah, I mean that's the big security hurdle that can be an obstacle. But generally the integration is nothing that we can't handle with feds and some contract support occasionally.
Okay, happy to follow up with that from our technical staff, or I'm sure actually the GSA staff would be willing to have that conversation as well.